Story 1. 24-hour open local shops. I wasn't as aware of the spiritual confusion. I miss being unaware and carefree. Story 2. Walmart is open 24 hours. It was the one place you could rely on after finishing the second shift at midnight. I bought Elder Scrolls 4. Oblivion for PlayStation 3 at Walmart after work. Story 3. We lost a sense of normalcy with COVID-19 and never quite regained it. There are many reasons for this that I struggle to articulate, but the world no longer feels stable. Even though the daily lives of most of us haven't changed drastically, I wouldn't be surprised if the global order shifted completely tomorrow. Story 4. In Germany, we had something called a summer hole. During the summer, there just wasn't relevant news, so all media outlets reported on a missing cow or something similar. However, since 2020, the world has been chaotic, so there is always something to report. Story 5. How much more affordable things were. One of the Japanese restaurants near me offered a bento box lunch special for $10. Now it costs around $20, and instead of dinner being $20, it is now over $30. Story 6. Interesting question. I think the pandemic brought out the worst in a certain section of the population, and now they feel emboldened to be even worse. Story 7. 24-hour convenience stores are supposed to be open around the clock. However, I noticed that at 3 a.m., several stores, including 3 7-Eleven locations nearby, had their doors locked despite their open lights being on. In my area, I know of just one place that is genuinely open during those hours, and I go there after work. Story 8. McDonald's before they transformed it into a fast food establishment resembling a large gray block with no cashiers. Story 9. The feeling of life is generally hard to define, but the COVID pandemic brought a monumental shift with it. Story 10. Restaurants should not require you to order with a QR code that increases prices or complicates the ordering process if you have changes to your food. In fact, QR codes in general are not beneficial. Story 11. I miss being able to cough without everyone looking at me like I just declared war on humanity. Now I can't even clear my throat without causing a panic. Story 12. Laughing at people in China for wearing masks all the time. I didn't realize it was about air pollution. It's strange. Americans would never do that. Story 13. The roller skating rink was my small town's version of a nice mall for kids and preteens. Parents would drop off their children and run their errands because it was a close-knit community. It was packed on Friday nights and all day Saturday until 1 a.m. Today, we are preparing to close it down. Story 14. My physical fitness and health have been impacted by an injury I sustained after the lockdown was lifted. Although I am recovering, I used to be strong and full of stamina. Now, even a long walk leaves me exhausted and can lead to long-term leg pain. Children, please avoid stepping on glass bottles. It can have lasting effects on your knees. Story 15. When people accepted the fact that vaccines were beneficial, many seemed to forget that before COVID-19, the anti-vaccine movement was largely limited to a select group of mostly Hollywood figures like Jenny McCarthy and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. For decades, the nation acknowledged that vaccines were a positive advancement. Polio was eradicated, and measles cases significantly declined. People received a flu shot every year and did not face the dangers of a pandemic like that of 1918. Now, we face a measles outbreak, and countless individuals have died from COVID-19 due to vaccine hesitancy, with nearly half of the American population believing that vaccines are harmful. Story 16. Not having people ask if you have COVID the moment you cough or sneeze in public. That, along with the family-run cafe that used to be near my house before it went bankrupt due to the pandemic. Story 17. I could smile at a stranger in the grocery store, and they would smile back, or I would hold a door open for someone, and they would say thank you. That doesn't really happen anymore. I feel like people are still choosing to use the pandemic as an excuse to avoid being friendly in public settings. My husband has been a server for almost 20 years, and he said it's the same way in restaurants now. Most customers don't bother making eye contact and grunt their orders. It makes me sad. Story 18. Discounts. The price of food increased significantly during the pandemic and has never returned to normal. £4 for crisps and £12 for butter? My wages do not match this increase. Story 19. It is possible to find a fully remote job. Some people view this as a negative concept. I was working fully remote long before the pandemic. There were some supervisors I had whom I never met in person. Essentially, if the job can be outsourced to another country, there is no reason for an onshore worker to be in the office unless they choose to be. Story 20. I miss how optimistic I felt about everything. There seems to be a lot less to be excited about since March 2020. Story 21. I miss people really talking to each other, and that comes from a huge introvert. Now everyone is on their phones all the time. Granted, I used to do that a bit to cope with social anxiety. But recently, I have noticed more and more people using social anxiety coping strategies that I used to feel uncomfortable about myself. Sometimes I sit in a room full of people and wonder, why are we not talking to each other? As someone who isn't the type to start conversations, this especially stands out to me. It seems like others aren't making the effort to engage anymore. Story 22. Not knowing with absolute certainty that 1 out of every 2 people I see are individuals who believe the most insane ideas, follow the most corrupt leaders, and are completely certain they are right about their beliefs is disheartening. I used to believe people were rational and generally intelligent and sought truth and knowledge. I was mistaken. Story 23. That time broke me. I don't want to go out and do things or visit places as much as I did before 2020, even though initially I didn't want to stay home that much. Real life does not have undo buttons. Story 24. 24-hour stores are becoming rare. Most places in my area close at 10. After work at night, there are limited food choices besides Taco Bell. We used to have 3 24-hour diners, but now none are available. Story 25. The confinement of going to work with no one on the roads was great, and it provided an opportunity to encounter many wild animals. Story 26. I believe society has not been normal since 2003, or possibly the late 1990s. Story 27. My friends, COVID has divided many people due to differing opinions. People can't seem to agree to disagree these days. Some individuals treated me as if I were a criminal because they heard I went for a walk in the forest alone without wearing a mask. Story 28. Walmart is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Dillard's is having end-of-the-month clearance sales with an extra 30 to 50% off. They now send merchandise to an outlet store in another state. Story 29. Movies and TV shows should not try to incorporate COVID protocols into their media just to appear trendy. I'm looking at you, shameless. Story 30. The naturalness of making plans and regular contact with family and friends made social connections easier to maintain. That has shifted significantly. Story 31. Calmness, peace, and quiet are everywhere. It fills the streets and shops. Story 32. A time before fees were attached to everything. We already pay taxes and now we pay service fees too. Is this forced tipping? When you purchase a product or service, you would assume all costs were calculated with some profit added for good measure. But now we have supply charges or service fees. This is frustrating. I can't wait for the fall of greedy capitalism. Story 33. I miss the days when trust the science meant actual science, not a slogan to push agendas. Back then, questioning authority didn't get you labeled a heretic. Now, it feels like we are living in a dystopian novel where independent thought is the real virus. Story 34. There was a good friend who created a page on Facebook that I used frequently before COVID-19 affected it. I actually met my ex on that page. Story 35. The economy has changed significantly. Store hours have drastically reduced, and we miss the convenience of 24-hour stores. More people prefer to shop online, leading to the decline of malls, which we will all come to miss. Attention spans have decreased. Honorable mention. People seem more distant now than ever. Story 36. Working from home whenever I want is no longer an option. Now my company monitors how many days a week I am in the office. Story 37. My local pub had a better atmosphere with the old crowd who stopped going there after COVID-19. Everyone seemed happier and more laid back. A housing estate was built near the pub on a nature reserve, which has been under construction since 2017 and finished around 2020 to 2021. This development soured the experience for some local residents. It may sound silly, but I haven't been there since last October. Feels like a different place now. Story 38. Peace and quiet were almost everywhere I went outside. The emptiness at the beach and in various locations made it feel like a private resort. Additionally, people appeared to genuinely embrace empathy and be kinder. Story 39. In my city, traffic is a significant issue. Pre-COVID and during it, congestion was manageable. Now, everything seems stalled. Cars, buses, and subways are all moving slowly or experiencing constant disruptions. Additionally, it appears that more people started using cars during COVID, leading to far too many on the roads now. Story 40. More affordable housing is needed. We had low interest rates, which may have risen regardless, but the stimulus overheated the economy, prompting the Federal Reserve to increase rates. Now, no one is willing to move because they either have a favorable mortgage rate or cannot afford current housing prices. Story 41. Every single event now, no matter how small, is in a fenced-off area surrounded by guards, registration, pat-downs, cameras, and numerous safety measures. I just want to relax in a plain field while listening to music and not be surrounded by people who want to ruin everyone's good time out of fear that someone might do something slightly unwanted. Tomorrow is Liberation Day in the Netherlands, and what used to be a fun and cozy event with a single stage in an urban forest or field, where you could lay back, smoke a joint, and chill with friends and good music, has been transformed into a fenced-off environment with security checking every bag at each entrance. Shops line the entire area selling overpriced and barely edible food. There are so many people that you can't even sit down anymore, and the area has turned into a pit of mud, beer, and unpleasant substances. I could go on, but I think you get the point. What frustrates me the most are the fences. The event near me was always open, but during the pandemic, they started fencing off the area, supposedly for safety. But we all know it's really so they can prevent people from bringing their own food and drinks since the vendors weren't selling anything worthwhile. Story 42. Anti-vaxxers are not a prominent part of the Republican Party. I have never identified as a Republican, but it is concerning how many individuals who reject scientific consensus exist in this country now. Story 43. I don't know. Those shots did something. I was going out with a girl who got the shots, and she changed overnight. It's as if her heart got colder. I don't know, it's like it took her soul somehow. Things had happened before between us, but after those shots, it felt like she lost her heart. I don't know. She loved me, but overnight, she didn't care about anything anymore. It was strange. Story 44. COVID seemed to erode what was left of a sense of shared purpose, at least in the United States. I have had to distance myself from many people who revealed their true colors. Story 45. 24-hour stores. Maybe we really don't need them, but I sure loved waking up early and going to the grocery store without any crowds. Story 46. I miss friendly cashiers and 24-hour shopping at Kroger and Walmart, reduced crime, and lower interest rates. Traffic congestion has worsened since the pandemic. Story 47. You still see the occasional technician or young engineer at work who believes government can be run like a business. Labor is wasting money on hospitals and similar services. Some new Australians also tend to vote Conservative, as they lack historical references about liberal parties. Story 48. I think it's more or less the same. Obviously, the cost of living has gone up, but it was going to increase regardless of COVID-19. Story 49. Walmart is my main choice, but another favorite is buffets. My city lost both of my favorites, Cece's and Golden Corral. Story 50. I'm going to channel John Pinette and say buffets. I've seen many buffets in towns, both big and small, close down. Only the chains in the cities have managed to keep their buffets. I miss them. Story 51. Stores are open later now. I've adjusted to it, but when you work at night, it's tough when everything that used to be open after your shift is no longer available. Story 52. I don't know if these are still held, but in Denver, there used to be bud tender and service nights. All the cannabis companies would show up at the bud tender nights, and you got to test their products. I missed the live rosin dab tables, and the edibles were incredibly tasty and strong. Service nights at the bars were for people who worked in the service industry and usually had to work weekends, so they were typically on Monday to Wednesday nights. If you brought in your work schedule or work badge, it was essentially happy hour all night. You knew that the people you met worked and usually weren't broke individuals always asking for a shot, as one might typically find on weekends. Story 53. Something I really miss from before COVID is just being around people without thinking twice. There were no masks, no weird distance, and no awkward "should we hug" moments. Everything felt more natural: random hangouts, late-night diner runs, even standing in line at a packed concert and joking about it. We didn't know how good we had it. Story 54. 24-hour establishments. Most places started closing at 10 or 11 p.m. and never returned to normal hours. There was even a diner near me that was famous for never closing. They had a sign hanging on the wall stating they had been open 24/7 since the 1950s. They took it down during the COVID pandemic, and now they close at 10 p.m. like almost every other place in the area. The only places near me that are still open 24/7 are a Burger King and a Denny's. There might also be a McDonald's that's supposed to be open 24/7, but I can't be sure because when I've tried to go there after midnight, they appeared to be closed. Story 55. I just feel like there are some people, even my friends, whom I can't fully trust now, and I miss that so much. I have long COVID, and I can't go out practically ever. I really need people to adhere to mask wearing and hygiene if I do go out, which is why I avoid going out unless it is absolutely necessary. However, all my friends except one have stopped wearing masks. They go to crowded places and have returned to pre-COVID levels of hygiene. How can I know I'll be safe around them? Will they wear a mask if I ask them to? Do they think I'm being overdramatic? I fear asking them why they don't wear a mask anymore because I dread hearing lukewarm excuses or causing an argument. I love my friends, but I cannot trust any but one on this. Not even my best friend. Needless to say, it wasn't like that before COVID. Story 56. When robust debates were about pineapple on pizza, not conspiracy theories, natural immunity versus vaccination, or anything against mitigating risks during a pandemic. Story 57. Places used to be open until 11 p.m. or later. Now it's 10 p.m. at the latest in my city. Normally, that wouldn't be a problem for most people, but I work overnight shifts. So, on my days off, I have to spend the entire night at home instead of going shopping around 10:30 p.m. Story 58. When every restaurant had physical menus, QR codes could be inconvenient, especially if the Wi-Fi is poor or if the menu or website has not been updated. Story 59. Businesses cannot use COVID-19 as an excuse to exploit consumers. Shrinkflation is attributed to supply chain issues stemming from the pandemic. Stores are removing baskets so that customers use carts and buy more items due to concerns about germs. Story 60. Everything was cheaper. Fewer people lived where I am. I think COVID impacted many people mentally. Story 61. No traffic. I work at the airport and fortunately I didn't get laid off. During that time, we could take a paid leave of absence. When we returned, there were still hardly any flights, so we would just walk the terminal to get our steps in while on the clock. That will never happen again. Story 62. I liked the idea of video game arcades, but one could definitely argue that they were on their way out well before COVID-19. However, they are not completely obsolete, as barcades have become popular. Story 63. I miss, in no particular order, feeling optimistic about the future. Having friends, affordable prices, 24-hour stores, quality customer service, public civility, which I noticed began to disappear around 2016, personal rights and freedoms, going to the store and finding everything I need, not worrying about public safety power shutoffs that can last for days. Story 64. Dating was much easier in the past. Now, fewer people seem interested in it. It's not common to approach others in a bar. Dating apps were frustrating and still are. It just feels deflating now compared to before the pandemic when it was exciting. Story 65. My sanity and my faith. Well, I was never truly sane, to be honest. I have always dealt with mental health challenges and some issues of faith, but now I feel like I have lost it all. I wonder if one day I will regain them, though I doubt it. I'm just waiting for the day when all of this ends and I can finally rest. Story 66. Prices have increased, as others have mentioned. I also miss being able to park close to the entrances of stores and restaurants. Now it's all curbside pickup spaces. Story 67. Remote job with some semblance of job security. Since some employees took extended leave for 18 months when they were sent home, the rest of us who have been working remotely for a long time are now being pushed to work in offices, which was never part of the agreement. After working remotely for almost 9 years, I now have to get an annual exception from Human Resources, which is becoming increasingly difficult to have approved. This is why we cannot have nice things. Story 68. The innocence of not knowing how awful a large segment of the human population is has changed my view of the world around me. It was not a great moment for humanity, compassion, or kindness. We had houses and businesses displaying no mask signs in their yards, and I can no longer look at those people the same way or support any of those businesses. No wonder I am struggling with some depression. Story 69. I miss thinking that the corporate environment didn't want us working from home just because we hadn't proven we could do it successfully, rather than because they had negative intentions. Story 70. Healthy lungs are important. My friends are living nearby because they haven't lost their jobs yet. My child's mental health and well-being changed for the worse before school. Story 71. Being able to go outside without the risk of contracting preventable airborne diseases is essential. Since the COVID-19 pandemic began, we have seen outbreaks of various diseases as infection control protocols are being relaxed in settings where they are still necessary. There are outbreaks of measles and tuberculosis worldwide, and there are movements to eliminate the use of disposable gloves in the UK. We have the tools to prevent illness such as vaccines, air filters, hypochlorous acid, and, most importantly, respirator masks. I was not fully aware of the airborne illnesses that can be transmitted before this pandemic, but it is knowledge I cannot unlearn. The pandemic is not over, and we are now in an era of pandemics. If you want to obtain free masks, check local resources to see if they offer free masks to keep you safe. Story 72. All the anti-vaccine individuals were often depicted as hippie granola people living off the grid in communes, not as a significant portion of the city police force. Story 73. You would generally never see clearly unqualified people discussing subjects like vaccines and their efficacy. The pandemic led to a surge of individuals, such as shop worker Dave, claiming to be more knowledgeable than scientists and infectious disease experts who had spent their lives studying these issues. Yet, on social media platforms, Dave seemed to know better. This phenomenon was quite unusual and not common before the pandemic. Story 74. People were more relaxed. Since the pandemic, everything has become black or white. There is nothing in between, and each side believes they are right. Story 75. I used to be carefree and undiagnosed as deaf, which only worsened each year. Now, when I go out, I see people doing foolish things like lining up for trivial reasons and acting like they are not aware of their surroundings. It seems like this behavior was intensified after the COVID-19 pandemic, highlighting a sense of selfishness in people. Story 76. Salaries are rising, but the UK is in a situation where salaries in technology have stagnated and are at the same level as before the COVID-19 pandemic. In fact, I would say they are even lower. Story 77. Being healthy. I put myself on the wrong path during COVID, influenced by an abusive ex-partner with borderline personality disorder. I gained over 70 pounds of fat, lost a significant amount of muscle, and developed depression and anger issues. Story 78. Pubs and clubs with large turnouts are enjoyable. Going out and experiencing a crowd is especially exciting when I'm performing. However, people are finding it harder to afford a night out now, resulting in pubs being more sparsely populated. Story 79. Third shift. Almost nothing in any city I have been in since COVID is open past midnight except for bars. Even most gas stations seem to close. Meijer and Walmart are no longer open 24 hours, and there are no more 24-hour diners. I miss that. Story 80. I miss not knowing that many people were conspiracy theorists and anti-vaccination advocates, including those I've known for decades. It might be recency bias, but I'm certain it was when people started arguing more and becoming increasingly polarized, and the internet worsened significantly. I honestly didn't expect this outcome. I thought humanity would emerge from such a crisis stronger and closer, yet the result has been the opposite. Story 81. A reliance on the general population's executive function and memory capacity to navigate decision-making in the modern world. Story 82. 24-hour diners. It was always great to be out late from a party or wherever and go to a diner to end the night. The diners near me now all close by 9. One doesn't even serve dinner anymore and closes after lunch. Story 83. I miss going into the office every day, enjoying the productivity we had. Now, I work from home and find it challenging to stay productive despite the flexibility. Story 84. 24-hour diners. Sometimes I enjoy taking a drive at night to clear my head, and I love stopping at a diner for something greasy. Now, all the good spots close by 10 p.m. Story 85. My friends, the stress of that experience severed many relationships, and people felt lost in a way, not to mention those who actually passed away. Story 86. The calmness of the streets was refreshing. I needed to continue working outside, and it felt like heaven. There was not a single person on the road. Story 87. Rush hour does not start at 2 p.m. Or is that just a Department of Motor Vehicles thing? The DMV refers to Washington, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia. It's what we locals call the region for those wondering why I mentioned DMV. Story 88. COVID-19 killed a couple of my favorite neighborhood restaurants. They just couldn't survive the shutdown. Some of those that did shifted to a takeout-only model that worked during the shutdown, but they never returned to regular dine-in. We meet friends for dinner every Friday, and our list of places is much smaller than it was before COVID-19. Story 89. I was already anxious before COVID, but I was starting to manage things. Now, post-COVID, I feel like I am back at square one and even more anxious. I dislike this situation. Story 90. I'm from Florida, and it seems there is less chaos here. I could have afforded the houses across the street from the apartment I still live in. The quality of the products is good. The snowbird season has arrived, and we are experiencing challenges with infrastructure as people continue to move in. Hospitality services and prices are reasonable. It took a long time for normal advantages to return. Story 91. I genuinely miss working in the office, rounding the floor as I get coffee and chat with colleagues on the way back. When faced with a complex problem, I could visit someone's desk and talk it through. As an introvert, it was the perfect amount and type of social engagement that I enjoy. It provided the added benefit of early insights into how my colleagues and teams were doing. Now, I like working from home for many reasons, but I never thought I would come to dislike it because I rarely see my work friends and colleagues. My employer transitioned to a fully remote model, sold all office space, and established a significant remote IT group to keep us connected. Story 92. Our collegial workplace culture has diminished. Now our colleagues are strangers we happen to work alongside. Our lunchroom used to be busy during coffee breaks and lunch. Now there are just a few people present at lunchtime. Closing office doors used to be the exception and a sign that you should not be disturbed. Now people close their doors frequently, and many have covered the small window in each door, making it difficult to know if anyone is inside. If there is a virtual meeting link, they attend the meeting online even if it is in a room just down the corridor. When we have out-of-town visitors, we used to take them to an open-invite dinner, which was well attended. Now, it often involves just the organizer and the visitors. It's rather disheartening. Story 93. People should not talk loudly throughout entire concerts. There have always been rude individuals, but it seems to have gotten much worse in recent years. Story 94. The unity between people. Back then, it was easier to form a friendship with a stranger or at least approach them for a casual talk. Nowadays, it seems like everyone is too busy, paranoid, or selfish to even check up on each other. I remember the smell of the fresh mowed grass during the last days before summer holiday. Summer nights used to have what kids nowadays call an aura. There was something magical in the air, being young and experiencing all that. I want it back. Story 95. Places are open past 11. In my town, most things shut down at 10. Everything else closes at 11. The only places open past 11 are certain gas stations, Taco Bell, and Taco John's. Story 96. Streaming shows without advertisements. Sharing a Netflix account. Not paying a monthly subscription for every service in my life. Story 97. The government does not realize how much actual control they could exert over us. Additionally, my routine has not returned since then, although that may be my own fault. Story 98. 24-hour stores. However, COVID did teach me that my preferred state of existence is called quarantine. Story 99. Nothing is nearly the same. COVID did not affect you. Move on. For most of you, that may be impossible. You will be impacted for the rest of your lives. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.